Hello and welcome to episode 8 of our STEM speaker series.
Wow.
8. We are on
All right.
8. We have done 8 episodes this far.
That's amazing.
Today, we are joined again by myself and Mr. Chuck Pawlik. And today, our very special guest. Some say we have some sort of resemblance. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know where they're getting it from, but thank you, Tim Sherman, for joining us today.
He's got the same last name as you.
He does. It's impressive. It's a great last name. You know what the best thing about Tim is, Chuck?
I don't.
His last name. Yeah. So
wow.
he has a pretty good birth date too. So
yeah.
Right. I also like his parents and his siblings and
Tim, what do you do?
I work in a product management capacity in mobile games. So I'm currently the head of product for our all new game initiatives for a company called Dots, which is exclusively into developing and publishing mobile games. And by mobile, I mean games for the iPhone and Android tablets, etc. Anything that you can download from the App Store or the Google Play Store.
Oh, so it's DOTS?
Yes.
So, DOTS, Dots,
yeah.
Correct.
That's not the Department of Transportation?
No.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Oh, you're a computer scientist. Okay.
Yeah.
All
so
right.
it is completely different from the Department of Transportation. It's our flagship game is 2 Dots. That's the one that we have live in the market. It's been in the market for about 5 years now. I think it's actually our 5-year anniversary this month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so that it's basically a game, I guess most people would be familiar with Candy Crush. It's along that type of lines of a puzzle game that you play from one level to the next. We have about more than 2,000 levels at this point. And it's been around. People seem to be enjoying it, but what we'd really like to do are develop new games in addition to that one, and that's primarily what I work on. That's it. You got it.
Dots. So along those lines, what are you working on now? Are you able to tell us any products, or is that top secret?
I can't tell names or specifics of it. We have one game currently that is that's been in a test market. We've done various releases on the Google Play Store in different countries, in Australia, in the UK, and now just recently in Finland, Norway, and Sweden to sort of gauge user interest and things like that. It has not been a finished product, but it is getting very close to finished. In about the next month or so, we should be releasing larger scale to different countries, still not in the US because we want to save that for a world when the game is optimized, best performing, to get into that market, since that's the biggest market that any Western developer gets into. Generally accounts for about 40% of the usage or revenue. It comes specifically from the US. So that game is getting closer. It's a puzzle game, more the similar mechanics to something that would be in Candy Crush, but a little bit different of a visual presentation that a user would get through progressing from one level to the next. It's a different theme. Outside of that, we have just kickstarted 4 new projects in which we've actually are going to test market releases, the very first ones, this week. Also, they are games that are based in the puzzle genre, but very much in a preliminary, almost a prototype stage. But we're working fast and trying to get as much done as we possibly can in the shortest amount of time.
So how does a test market come about? How is the region selected? How does the game look in that regard versus when it's actually full released? And is there any revenue earned during the testing period?
In the initial test, it would depend. In most cases, there is no revenue. I'll start with that question first, because we do not have a store in the game. So we're primarily just focused on user retention and how many people are coming back to play on the next day basis up to 30 days later, and sort of looking at that retention curve to see what could our long-term retention look like if we were to continue our daily active active users look like if we were able to acquire users on a basis. So in the initial release, we don't focus on revenue at all. If we do have a store in the game, users are able to purchase it, but it's not a metric that we look at. What determines the test region is two-part. We look at tier 1 and tier 3 territories. So tier 1 being sort of a westernized market that we're looking at that is stable economically and generally has users who retain and make purchases similar to what a US user would do. So we're looking at Western Europe, Australia, things like that, to basically gauge our interest there. Canada as well, of course. So what determines that is generally we start out with a game that's purely in English. We don't go to the localization effort until it's time to scale up the game and reach out to different markets. So when we're looking at a tier 1 country, we're looking at people who would have a certain level of English proficiency, particularly if a game is more text heavy than another one, that becomes more important than it would be before. So we're looking at primarily areas that are Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, as well as the Nordic regions. So Finland, Norway, and Sweden, which their main language is not English, but there is a level of English proficiency there. And we can acquire users through advertisements that are in English. And we feel confident that we can get a good read on retention and other things in those regions. So what I've recently done in the last few weeks is prioritize those regions by putting together a scorecard in which we're looking at Google Play data that Google Play has shared with us that looks at retention rates, both your next day retention rate, meaning your day after install, up to your 30-day retention rate, which are key metrics when you're determining what the player lifetime value would be, as well as ARPDAU, which is your average revenue per daily active user. This is another input into your lifetime value formula. We have good comparable information with those within the tier 1 territories. So we're using both of those things to stack up which areas they are. And then we're looking at actual data from 2DOTs as well, meaning what is our user acquisition cost. So we're looking at what the cost per install is of acquiring a user in these territories. Australia tends to be more expensive than these other regions, which means that in an early prototype stage, if we want to get a couple of thousand users to test, we would rather pay $2,000 as opposed to $4,000 or $5,000. So we prioritize that way. What is the cost? And then what gives us the most reliable metrics going forward? And what we found based on that is usually Norway and Sweden top out that list. Those are the areas that we would like to start in first in a tier 1 territory. And then as we expand to gauge interest later on down the road, we'll look into adding new territories. The other flip side of this is we also look at tier 3 territories where we're primarily not focused ever on revenue, but we do look at engagement metrics, retention metrics, and do tech tests there to determine technical stability. So for instance, we do a lot of releases in the Philippines and in India. And there we're literally just looking at sort of crash rates, what our level to progression is, making sure that everything is sound so that when it does come time to spend a couple of $1,000s to acquire users in a test market for a tier 1 territory, we've done the due diligence and that's not money wasted because we all of a sudden encounter a bug or a crash in a tier 1 territory. So
they're kind of the guinea pigs to figure out if the game's screwing up or not. You don't want to. Because if you're in a tier 1 market and the game is buggy, the worry is that you lose those customers forever and it's not going to be successful?
Yeah, we're not worried at this stage of losing a customer forever because we're still validating the product. Yeah. But we are concerned with getting poor data back and then getting an inaccurate read on what the game is like and wondering why is retention so poor, and then have it be related to a bug or something like that, and then in which case we would have to rerun the release, and that's double the amount of spend that we would have spent to begin with. So we want to save our money and our budget and optimize that from a sort of a company P&L standpoint, make sure we're not wasting money.
Tim, have you always been a gamer?
Yeah, so I wouldn't classify myself as a hardcore gamer, but like any sort of youth male growing up between 1980 and now, which is basically 100% of people have played video games in their life. And so I grew up playing console games. I would say after college, I stopped really playing console games because you have more responsibilities, it's work life. It wasn't a way that I ever relaxed. It was more of a way to kill spare time. And when I had less spare time, that became less and less of a part of my life. I would say that shifted a little bit when the game Rock Band came out. That was something that was really engaging and sort of a social experience. Actually taught me how to play the drums, essentially, which was cool. But then mobile gaming came up, and it's particularly with smartphones, in which case you can get sort of this bite-sized experience from moment to moment, be sitting on a couch, being relaxed. It's things that kind of fit within my lifestyle better than sitting on a couch and concentrating and playing a console game. So I've always been interested in video games. There was a moment there where it just no longer fit my lifestyle and kind of got away from me, but then it was revived in the interest of when mobile devices became to the point where there's a touch screen and you can get meaningful gameplay in 1 to 2 minutes at a time, or spend your time engaging with it for up to hours if you want to.
Our older brother, Dan, who we're going to talk to in a future episode, he worked for Electronic Arts, and he was the one who got the business deal for Electronic Arts to get Rock Band to publish it. So, he sent us the whole Rock Band game with the whole drum set. And back when he used to work for EA, we'd get a lot more console games. So he and I were hooked there, and that's what got me back into playing guitar. I was actually playing Rock Band, and got Tim into the drums, and then we joined the old.
I'm going to give you a little secret here. Who really likes Rock Band and all that?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, you've got the pro
You got the
drum set. I got
cymbals.
that as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, we never had the cymbals.
Yeah.
Have you been
They
playing?
went wild with that.
Nice. Yeah. So then we actually learned how to play. Tim learned how to play the drums for real, and I got back into the guitar. So, all due to video games.
So Tim, I know that you talked about in the beginning, you talked about your college, but what brought you into this career? What was that road like?
Yeah, it was interesting. So after college, I worked for a law firm. Immediately after my undergrad from the University of Wisconsin, I was in Chicago. I worked for a law firm called Kirkland and Ellis, which is one of the bigger law firms in the country, and they were headquartered in Chicago. The thought there was,
went to the same college?
Undergraduate.
For undergrad,
yeah.
yes.
And actually, I eventually got my doctorate at USC after he had gotten his MBA at USC.
So, did you guys room together?
In college, yeah, we lived together our last year.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he lived.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Separate bedrooms.
Yeah. All right. I'm not getting personal. I'm just trying to get a picture here.
So yeah, after college, I thought about my oldest sister is a lawyer, and I thought, oh, maybe that's a sort of a profession that I want to go to. But I did not want to go to law school immediately until I worked in that environment and was figuring things out. You could say that I didn't necessarily know exactly what I wanted to do with my life at that point, but started out in a law firm, realized after some time that I did not want to do that, and that I needed a career shift, needed to get out of that into something else. And basically, that's when I got more interested in looking at MBA programs where I could bridge that gap. Initially, I thought maybe, okay, what's a good parallel to, offering legal consultation would be, maybe working as a consultant in a business capacity, so something like that. So essentially that was my pitch for MBA programs was, oh, I'm interested in doing consulting. I have this relevant client-based experience. This is what I want to do. But being very open-minded that once I got into my MBA, that I wanted to explore sort of different careers, different things that were there, to ultimately decide what I could transition to, what I could do best. As it ended up, I ended up going to USC, which is, in Los Angeles, of course, and there's a heavy focus on the entertainment industry just within the city itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I was never dead set on going into video games as that happened. I actually got more interested in being in film and TV during my first year, specifically in the digital distribution aspect of it. So looking at stuff on, video on demand or electronic sell-through, just stuff where user doesn't have to go out and purchase a physical copy of something. They can get content when they want it, where they want it, especially with a click of a button.
Sure.
As it turned out, it's a 2-year program with the summer free for basically which most people get internships. I was looking at sort of opportunities within NBC Universal, within a couple of other of the big 5 film studios, things like that. But what I ended up getting was an internship at a company called THQ, which was up in Agora Hills in the LA area. And that was an internship in brand management for console games. So I spent the summer doing that, and at the same time, then leveraged that into a digital distribution internship during the fall semester with NBC Universal, which I thought was a nice, good step up, somewhere where I wanted to be and something where ultimately that could be my career. However, after having both of those experiences, I was able to really, really narrow down what I wanted to do, and that was be working in a digital industry, which we could go direct to consumer, but also in video games as opposed to film or television, because what I loved about video games was I could actually, being in a product management or brand management role, actually influence the product that we're making, as opposed to with film and television, everything is packaged and done before that. That's something that the director, producer, everybody packages together. Yeah, you're purely on the business side of things.
Right.
But in video games, being a business owner, you are also very, very hands-on in the creative process and the creative development of the product. So at the time, this was 2011 fall, bridging towards December of 2011. I was going to be graduating in May of 2012. I then narrowed it down. This is at the height of Zynga's Facebook success as well. So Zynga had started this free-to-play model through Facebook, through Farmville, and was making tons and tons of revenue on this one game. And I got really interested just based on the free-to-play business model in general. So played a lot of those games, really studied up, but then looked specifically for opportunities between then and May in which I could get into mobile gaming, because free-to-play mobile games were just starting to hit the market and sort of shape the landscape. It primarily had been, $1.99 or $4.99 one-time downloads where you pay up front and that's your game, and you get maybe 7 days worth of content and that's it. But it shifted much more to a free-to-play game that was evergreen, that you can download for free, but in theory, it could be playing forever and ever and ever. And I just really liked that business model. I liked that engagement practices, and I knew that it was sort of up and coming, and felt pretty strongly that with the way that smartphones were going, that this would be a sustainable industry and an interesting place to work. So ultimately, having narrowed down my focus at that time, I then just started to apply to these companies, and where I ended up first by summer of 2012 was my first job in mobile gaming for Electronic Arts based in Los Angeles, and basically worked in a core product management function in which we didn't focus on one exclusive game for the company, but rather their entire portfolio. So looking at things, EA had acquired PopCap, so there was Plants vs. Zombies and Bejeweled. They had acquired some companies, Firemint, and another studio in Australia, which became the Fire Monkeys. They were the makers of The Sims Free Play and of Real Racing 3. And then we had The Simpsons Tapped Out, which was from a studio in Eastern Canada on the tip in Prince Edward Island, a very remote location, but a very successful studio. And right after I joined, Simpsons launched globally and became, at that time, for a week or two, the #1 grossing game in the App Store. So it was very exciting. It supplanted Clash of Clans at the time, which was the #1 top grossing game for a short period of time. So that's kind of how I got into the industry, and I've stuck with it since.
Where do you see the industry leading now? You've been in it for, I don't know how many years. What's the future hold?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think that the industry, particularly for certain genres, is going to sustain. And so while we are at a mature point, in which case it's harder and harder for an independent developer to launch a new game simply because of the cost to acquire a user. So we do see some consolidation there. So if somebody does make it big, there's a lot of companies that want to grow out their mobile portfolio, so very interested in acquiring new users. But I think the games specifically, and this is kind of a focus why I joined at Dots, is because they are very puzzle casual game focused. And I just don't see that genre going anywhere outside of mobile anytime soon. This is something that is very sort of easily accessible and can be played by anybody sort of in the world. And our actual target demographic, I wouldn't say target demographic, but the majority of the people who play it is 60% of people are women between the ages of 30 and 50. Who are not necessarily interested in, or some might be, but by and large, they wouldn't classify themselves as gamers.
Are you playing it right now? Are you already hooked?
I'm playing. I can't put it down.
Yeah. You don't fit the demographic though.
Yeah. So I see casual puzzle being really in it for the long haul on mobile. Where I think some things might shift is in the more core gaming space. And what you see with Fortnite, for instance, that's multi-platform. So I think we will see more things that people can get a deeper experience in with PC or console gaming, but having that opportunity to shift to mobile devices also. So I see, and this can get, as devices get more and more sophisticated, there could be more of an opportunity on the mobile platform to be doing things that are streaming relevant, or maybe even have an experience that's closer to what you can get to a console or a PC. But yeah, so there could be some disruption there, some continued change in that regard and how people approach it. But I think there's going to be more consistency in the puzzle and casual space, because I think that I don't see the mobile phone going anywhere. Like 5 years ago, people were talking about the Apple Watch when it launched and how that was going to change. People weren't going to need phones. I thought that was ridiculous, because why would you wear something on your wrist all the time if you didn't need to? Your phone in your pocket essentially serves as your clock, and the interface, holding one arm up and tapping on a small screen with another one, was not going to supplant a phone. So I don't see mobile phones and that sort of user interface and interaction in part of our daily lives going anywhere. And as long as that is there, particularly for our sort of core demographic that we're going after, which are people who are really just into bite-sized gaming playing while they're waiting in line in a grocery store, or on their couch while loosely paying attention to a television or something like that. We're going to have games that they're interested in, that they can easily pick up and easily let go, that don't require too many rules, something that they can really grasp the hook of, but while also providing some challenge. So that part I feel pretty confident in sustaining for a long period of time. Don't see a ton of disruption. But as you're looking at other games that are more in sort of a core game experience for your person who identifies as a gamer, that could shift dramatically. So in 5 years, maybe that looks much different.
So obviously in the last couple of months, we've had COVID-19 has changed the landscape of the world. A lot more people are staying at home. How has usage data looked during this time of the pandemic?
Yeah, so play patterns have shifted a little bit. It seems like people in general are getting up an hour later, because they're not commuting or things like that. So picture of you were commuting, the first thing you do, say you wake up at 7 a.m. and then you play on your phone for 30 minutes away before you get out of bed. That's now shifted to 8 a.m. because people are commuting 5 seconds to their living room or wherever their computer screen is. It hasn't been, so in the US, our metrics basically are more or less the same though, and we're looking at day over day retention and then spending rate. It's very similar. Some games have, or some companies have gone more aggressive on the user acquisition front, in which case they've paid for a lot more users to come in during this period. I doubt that their retention and their ARPDAU metrics specifically, which equate to your average value, basically your lifetime value of the user, have changed much. But certainly there's more people at home that you can have more time to devote for these things. But in mobile, in the casual space, it hasn't changed all that much. Like what's really impacted the industry is things like PUBG, so which is and then Fortnite, these two games that are very teenager centric. Teenagers being at home and not having to go to school, those engagement levels have just spiked dramatically. So it really depends on who your target audience is. For people who are, say, 30 plus, who potentially have, they have to figure out their life, they still have to go to work, or if they're out of work, that's a difficult situation. They've got other things to worry about other than mobile games. But for a typical 15-year-old who just loves the fact that they don't have to go to school and can sit and play video games all day, they're not going to play our game. They're going to play Fortnite or anything else like that. So we haven't been
playing more
disrupted by
Fortnite than I've ever played before.
Yeah, I was going to ask Chuck. You have some experience with teenagers at home. Have you noticed any increase in gameplay on that front?
Actually, my kids are kind of different. It's actually interesting. I haven't with Walker. Walker plays games at night. We go to bed, he plays games. He stays up till probably too late and plays games. My daughter is the one who is starting to play Roblox a lot and really get hooked. It's really interesting, actually. And it's a social thing. It's not the game. The game, but it's really a social thing. She has all her friends in that Roblox, and they create their world, and she screams and yells, and I'm getting much better at Fortnite. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. So when can we expect your new project to actually hit stores, or hit the Play Store and the App Store? Yankees Cup, you see that, Chuck? Far superior New York team.
Right. It's
Whatever.
Tanaka.
Whatever.
I should have. I forgot to bring out the CC Sabathia Jedi bobblehead for May 4th podcast. So
whatever, a real New York team.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
So anyways, I would say September, October is when to look at something on the US store, ideally. And then with one of these new ones, we're quicker to iterate, maybe sooner.
Okay.
Great.
In the meantime, you can play Two Dots.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. In the meantime, everybody play Two Dots. You got something to do? Okay, there it is right there. Chuck's got it. We can find it on Google Play and the App Store, correct?
That's correct.
All right.
I actually downloaded this many years ago. I think when it first came, you said it's been out 5 years?
Roughly, yeah.
I think I was living in Albania when I first downloaded this, because I didn't recognize it until I got to the first game, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I remember this game. It's a nice game. It's a little bit different. It's got a different look. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's definitely a different visual, and then it's also a little bit different of a mechanic that requires sort of a different strategy.
Right. Well, Tim, I can't thank you enough for coming out here. Do you have any advice for our seniors as they go into this big, cruel world, and what they could possibly do to be like you?
Yeah, I would say that if they're interested in video games, there are a lot of different jobs and disciplines in video games. So like I'm in product management, but I work with people on a daily basis who the engineer do the coding, both on the front end and the back end. There's artists, there's visual designers, there's data analytics. So a world of different opportunities, each with different disciplines. So if you are interested in video games, but want to be in that industry, and maybe it's worth looking at sort of different skill sets that you have and how you could get involved, because there's many different ways to get into it.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. All right.
Nice meeting you.
Yep.
You too.
And that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen.